I'm a high school student who works as a lifeguard at our local public pool during summers. The pay isn't amazing, but it helps me save up for college, and most days are pretty chill. Plus, the free pool access is a nice perk in this scorching heat. I've been doing this for 2 summers now, and while I've dealt with my share of rowdy kids and grumpy adults, nothing prepared me for what happened last week. Our pool is split into two sections by a lap lane. One side has a shallow end with stairs for little kids, and the other has a slide that dumps into the deep end. Whoever designed this layout probably didn't think it through, because kids are constantly crossing the lap lane to get to and from the slide. I was working the afternoon shift when I first noticed her. She'd come to the pool before. This lady who always showed up with her snorkel and flippers like she was going deep sea diving instead of swimming in a public pool. Usually, she'd do her laps without any issues, but today was different. The pool was packed, as you'd expect on a hot summer day. Kids were splashing around, playing games, and doing what kids do at pools. Everything was normal until I heard this unholy shriek from the lap lane. Karen started screaming at the top of her lungs, demanding that the kids get out of her lap lane, punctuating every other word with profanity. I was shocked. Like, who screams profanities at a family pool? I walked over to try and calm her down, telling her that this was a family pool and that kind of language wasn't acceptable here. She just glared at me like I'd suggested she swim in her Sunday best. Then she started yelling at me, saying I had one job to do, which was keeping kids out of her lap lane. She kept using that same inappropriate language, making quite the scene. She dove back in but only made it halfway, before some more kids crossed her path. She spun around so fast I thought she might create a whirlpool. This time she went on a rant about how this was the only place she could get away from her own kids and how she deserved this space, demanding again that I remove all the children from her lane. At this point I had to step in. I told her she needed to leave the pool, explaining that her language was unacceptable here. She started climbing out, and that's when I saw it. That look people get when they're cooking up something stupid. You know, the one where you can practically see the bad ideas forming in their head? This lady, I kid you not, shoves her snorkel back in her mouth, turns around and falls backward into the pool while giving me both middle fingers. Then she starts swimming down the lane, breathing so hard through her snorkel, it sounded like Darth Vader having an asthma attack. That's when I noticed this little boy couldn't have been more than 4 or 5, wearing those green arm floaties. His older sisters, probably around 12, were supposed to be watching him, but were too busy gossiping and playing games. The kid managed to wiggle his way into the lap lane right in Karen's path. I was on the opposite side of the pool when it happened. Karen reached the kid, and in one swift motion, she grabbed him around the waist, ripped off his floaties, and shoved him under the water. Her hands were so big they almost wrapped completely around him. Have you ever seen someone drowning? It's nothing like in the movies. This kid's eyes went wide with panic, and his body started thrashing uncontrollably. All my lifeguard training went out the window. Pure instinct took over. I jumped in and launched myself across the pool, yelling at her to get off him as I shoved her away. I grabbed the kid, swimming him to the edge as fast as I could. My co-worker helped me get him out, and I couldn't even remember the proper procedure for chest compressions in that moment. I frantically called to my co-worker to get the water out of the boy's lungs. Karen went quiet, like she finally realized what she'd done. The rage drained from her face, replaced by this sickly pale look. I didn't care about her emotional journey though. I shouted at her to get out of the pool immediately. Someone had already called the police, and they showed up within minutes. They arrested Karen on the spot. Turns out, attempting to drown a child is a pretty serious offense. She got charged with attempted murder and child endangerment. The kid's parents pressed charges, and last I heard, she's looking at some serious prison time. The boy recovered physically, thankfully. His parents sent me a thank you card last week saying he's in therapy now, but doing better. I still work at the pool, but I keep an extra close eye on the lap lane these days. Note: there weren't any specific times or monetary amounts in this text to convert to spoken form, but I've added The line breaks after each sentence as requested. I'm 18 years old now, but this happened when I was 17. I work at a local supermarket in the Netherlands as a stock clerk. And let me tell you about one of the wildest shifts I've ever had. Our store regularly runs these promotions where customers get special items when they buy certain products. That week, we had this promotion where if you bought 3 items from this particular kid's brand, you'd get this creepy looking doll. I'm really glad we don't do toy promotions anymore, and you'll soon understand why. It started as a regular Thursday afternoon shift. I was restocking shelves when this young girl walked past me several times. On her 4th pass, she finally approached me. She asked me if the dolls were out of stock. I explained that we were getting more that evening and she would unfortunately have to wait. She wanted to know what time they would arrive, so I told her they would probably come after closing time because the shipment was delayed, and she would need to come back tomorrow. The girl walked away looking disappointed, and I felt bad for her, but there wasn't anything I could do. I went back to work and didn't think much of it. About 2 hours later, just 5 minutes before closing time, I was exhausted and ready to finish my shift. That's when her mother showed up, and let me tell you, she was fuming. She walked straight up to me and demanded to know if I was the boy who told her daughter she couldn't have one of those dolls. I hesitantly confirmed it was me. She then started screaming about how I had made her little girl cry. I tried to apologize and explain that the dolls were out of stock, but she cut me off mid-sentence. She threatened to get me fired if I didn't get her a doll right then and there. I attempted to explain again about the timing and store closing, but she interrupted me again, demanding to look in the back because she didn't believe me. She was screaming at this point. I saw my colleague look up from his work across the store, but he just went back to what he was doing. Against my better judgment, I took her to our storage area, which is usually off-limits to customers. I grabbed our inventory terminal to show her we were out of stock. Before I could even show her the incoming order details, she grabbed the terminal, worth about 1,400 euros, and smashed it on the ground. I immediately called my supervisor through my earpiece. The woman knew she couldn't touch me because I was a minor and there were cameras everywhere, but that didn't stop her from going completely berserk. She started kicking over our stocked carts and throwing 6 packs of drinks on the floor, making an absolute mess. After what felt like forever, but was probably just a minute, my supervisor and 3 team leaders arrived. My supervisor, who apparently had some combat training, immediately pinned the woman to the ground in some kind of hold. One team leader called the police while the rest of us stood there in shock. The police arrived within 20 minutes, during which the woman surprisingly stayed put. They took her to the office, and as we walked there, she kept giving me death glares and muttering insults. In the office, she tried to claim that I had harassed her daughter. The police asked me some questions, and I was so scared and nearly crying, but they checked the security footage from earlier. It clearly showed my interaction with the girl, where I kept a proper distance and was completely professional. The police took her away. It turns out she caused over 2,000 euros in damage between the terminal and the destroyed merchandise. She ended up getting charged with vandalism, making threats, and trespassing in the employee area. She also got banned from all branches of our supermarket chain. My supervisor helped clean up the mess and sent me home early because I was pretty shaken up. After this incident, we completely stopped doing toy promotions at our store. We'd had some problems before, but nothing this extreme. I've been working as a cleaner for almost a decade now. Started right after high school because I needed something stable, and honestly, I've always found satisfaction in making spaces spotless. Our cleaning company had a contract with this big corporate office building, and things were actually pretty good for the first couple of years. We had about 20 cleaners, and the workload was fair. Everything was calculated based on the space we had to clean, number of bathrooms, kitchens, you name it. Then everything changed when new management took over. The new executives decided they were too smart to waste money on backup cleaners when people took time off. Then, when a few of our colleagues left, they didn't bother replacing them. That's when things started going downhill. The chief of operations, let's call her Karen, started sending these nasty emails about how we weren't meeting standards. One morning, she cornered me in the hallway. She started yelling about how unacceptable the situation was, claiming they'd received multiple complaints about the building's cleanliness. When I tried to explain that we were doing our best but were severely understaffed, she just brushed it off. She told me it wasn't her problem and threatened us with disciplinary action if we didn't step up. I'd had enough. I contacted our workers' union representative, who immediately called for a meeting with management. Our union rep went straight to the point, explaining that the contract clearly outlined the required number of cleaners based on the building specifications, and they were in breach of contract. Karen tried to defend their position by claiming they were operating within budget constraints. Our union rep shut that down quickly, warning them that they could take this to court, but suggested they'd probably prefer to avoid those legal fees. They eventually agreed to hire more staff but tried to drag their feet about it. Karen started making excuses about how these things take time, mentioning they needed to post positions and conduct interviews. Our union rep laid out our conditions. No more threats to the cleaning staff. They had to actively try to hire people. We would only clean what was covered in our contracts, and any complaints had to go through the union, not directly to workers. Karen reluctantly agreed, looking annoyed, but insisted that customer areas must remain a priority. That's when our union rep pulled the most brilliant move. After the meeting, they gathered us all together and laid out the plan. We were instructed to clean only the customer-facing areas perfectly, leaving all executive offices, human resources areas, and management spaces untouched, not even emptying their bins. The rep wanted to see how they'd like that. The first week was interesting. We did exactly as told. Customer areas were spotless, but the executive wing started getting, well, let's say fragrant. By the end of the first week, Karen called the union to complain that we weren't doing our jobs. When our union rep asked if the customer areas were clean, she had to admit they were, but tried to protest further. The rep simply reminded her that we were following our agreement exactly. By the end of the second week, things got even better. The executive bathrooms had no toilet paper or soap, their bins were overflowing and dust was collecting everywhere. The CEO finally noticed when his own office started smelling like a forgotten takeout container. When he demanded to know why his office hadn't been cleaned, I simply directed him to speak with our union representative. The next day, there was an emergency meeting. The CEO was furious when he learned what had been happening. He was shocked to discover this was all because we were understaffed, and even more angry that Karen had known about it. When she tried to defend herself by saying they were trying to optimize the budget, he exploded, asking if making his office smell like a dumpster was her idea of optimization. He demanded she fix it immediately. Within hours, job postings went up everywhere. They even offered us overtime pay to clean the executive areas while they hired new staff. 2 weeks later, we had a full team again, plus backup staff for when people took leave. Karen got demoted. Turns out the CEO didn't appreciate finding out she'd been cutting corners by making our lives miserable. Now, whenever we have meetings with management, it's amazing how quickly they address our concerns. Funny how a little bit of their own medicine changed everything. Let me give you some background about myself first. I'm a teenager with Asperger's syndrome, and while some people might find it unusual, insects have always been my source of comfort and fascination. I can spend hours observing them, learning about their behaviors, and yes, sometimes gently handling them when possible. My neighbors, the cool ones, not the crazy one I'm about to tell you about, had given me permission to explore their garden for insects. They knew about my condition and how bugs helped me stay calm and focused. They even encouraged my interest, sometimes calling me over when they spotted an interesting specimen. It was a warm spring afternoon when I had my first encounter with that woman. I was carefully examining the soil near some flowering bushes when I found this beautiful swallowtail butterfly caterpillar. It was just sitting there on a leaf, munching away. I very carefully picked up the leaf it was on to get a better look. That's when I heard the clicking of heels approaching. I didn't pay much attention at first. People walk by all the time, right? But then I heard the shrill voice. She demanded to know what I was doing to the poor creature. I looked up to see this woman, probably in her 40s, wearing what looked like expensive clothes and sporting that infamous haircut. I tried to be polite, even though sudden confrontations make me anxious. I explained that I was just observing the swallowtail butterfly caterpillar. She immediately accused me of lying, saying she could see me crushing it in my hands. She demanded I get off what she claimed was her property. I told her this wasn't her property and that my neighbors had given me permission to be here. She got even more agitated, claiming the flowers and even the caterpillar were hers and threatened to call the police if I didn't put it down immediately. By this point, my anxiety was rising, but I was also getting irritated. I had enough experience with bullies at school to recognize when someone was just trying to throw their weight around. I told her I could show her the text messages from my neighbors giving me permission to be here. She dismissed this completely, saying she didn't care about any text messages. Then she started mocking me, saying I was a teenager playing with bugs like a little child, telling me it wasn't normal, and asking what was wrong with me. That's when something in me snapped. Not violently. I've always been against violence, but I'd had enough of being judged for being different. I turned her question back on her, pointing out that I wasn't the one yelling at a teenager about a caterpillar that wasn't even hers. She got even more outraged and threatened to call my parents. I told her to go ahead since they knew exactly where I was and what I was doing, and asked her to leave me alone. For the next few weeks, every time I passed by her house on my way to the bus stop, she'd give me these nasty looks. She even started taking photos of me with her phone, probably trying to intimidate me. I just ignored her and kept walking. Then came the big windstorm. It was a massive one that hit our area, knocking over trash cans, garden furniture, and plenty of other things. The morning after, I was walking to the bus stop when I saw her in her yard, holding up a fallen garden sign. As soon as she spotted me, her face twisted into this triumphant smirk. She excitedly proclaimed that she had finally caught me, calling me a vandal. When I asked what she meant, she accused me of coming to her yard the previous night and trashing it. I pointed out there had literally been a windstorm and everyone's yard was a mess. She didn't buy it and threatened to call the police, saying they would dust for fingerprints to prove it was me. I sarcastically pointed out how unlikely it would be to get fingerprints from a garden sign that had been outside in the rain and wind. She threatened that I would be sorry when they arrested me. I simply told her I had been home playing video games during the storm, that my whole family could verify that, and that she should go ahead and call the police because I needed to get to school. I continued walking to the bus stop, leaving her spluttering and waving her phone around. Later that day, I found out she actually did call the police. My cool neighbors had security cameras that showed the wind knocking everything over, including her precious sign. The police apparently told her to stop harassing me or she'd be the one in trouble. She still lives in that house, but now she pretends I don't exist when I walk by. Sometimes I see her rushing inside when she spots me coming. I still visit my neighbor's garden regularly, and their flower beds are now home to a beautiful butterfly garden that we planted together.